This is Science Quest. With your host, Jed Allen Friels. He's taking you around the world, discussing everything science.
Hi, I'm Jed Allen Friels, and thanks for joining us today on Science Quest for another adventure aboard the Lake Guardian. Catherine, tell us about the sled and what you guys are about to take a look at.
All right, well, we're going to drop the sled down and we're going to take a look at the mussel coverage over the bedrooms. This is a new method they're trying out. In the past, they used photographs. And so we're going to estimate aerial coverage of the zebra mussels using a GoPro attached to the sled.
Thanks, Catherine. Going to be great. Liz, you guys getting a lot of research?
Yes, lots of good footage to analyze with visual estimations and the software program Adobe Photoshop.
Explain what you guys are doing with visual estimations. What do you mean by that?
We're stopping every 30 frames of footage and visually estimating the percent coverage of quagga mussels. As we move on to the next one, we're putting our data together to get an estimation of the total footage of the total coverage.
I know an interesting thing happened in you guys' lab in your research. Steve, you were telling me the other day that sometimes it might be easier to estimate the amount of floor that wasn't covered as opposed to what was covered. Explain that to me.
Sometimes you got the algae, the podoptera that kind of masks or covers up the quagga mussel so you can't see, so it's better kind of study an inverse, see the floor, see the coverage behind that.
So we're actually maybe counting what we don't want or what's not there,
right.
And it makes our job a little bit easier. Well, hopefully we'll get the bugs worked out right here and we'll be right back on the floor in a little bit.
Thank you.
Roger that, 1 knot ahead. Ready? Coming up. So it's got this yellow bridle on the front. It's a fairly weak line. It's designed to be a break point if anything were to happen. That way the yellow line will break free before we damage the cable.
So if we would catch the sled or catch the cable or something
Roger that, 1 knot.
on a wreck, on a log, on anything underneath, we'd break away there.
Behind you, back, behind you. Stay on the apron.
So, we've been out on the deck and you've seen what the benthic sled looks like. But the exciting part is we're back in the office now looking at some of the footage we've collected. This is Dr. Glenn Warren. He's from the Environmental Protection Agency, and he's taking a look at the footage that just came up on the benthic sled. Dr. Warren, was it good footage?
It's beautiful footage. We have 10 minutes of great pictures at the bottom.
Well, let's take a look at some of those pictures. Dr. Warren, what are we seeing?
Let me turn this on. We're seeing the front of the sled. These are the skids coming in, hitting the bottom. All these dark areas are quagga mussels on the bottom of Lake Michigan.
So these are quagga mussels then.
Right.
Sisters to the zebra mussel, or relative to the zebra mussel.
Right.
And these are what's
Right.
covering the bottom of Lake Michigan.
They are, and we're at 40 meters depth, so 140 feet, and they're covering the bottom. We even at this depth, we have some algae growing down there, which never would have happened in years past.
Now talk to me, how is it possible for algae to be growing at 140 feet, Dr. Warren?
It's partly because of these mussels. They filter so much out of the water that it's cleared up over the last 15 years to the point where things can grow that deep.
So it's a catch-22. The quagga mussels are an invasive species and we don't like them, but on the other hand, the water has become so clear in Lake Michigan that sunlight's penetrating and we have growth.
Right. The water is beautiful.
Right.
It's a beautiful blue, but it's pretty poor as far as food for anything.
Right. Beautiful and blue is not necessarily good for our ecosystem.
Right.
Right.
And the sled is moving about 1 knot, 1 nautical mile per hour, just a little faster than a mile per hour.
I noticed the sled is doing a good job. I noticed on some of our previous tests, the sled was digging in a little bit more. Have you made some adjustments?
We have. The last time out, the sled flipped. We had pictures upside down. And since then, we've lengthened some line that was kind of pulling it up and tinkered with the speed a little bit.
So scientific research doesn't always go perfect, does it?
No, it never goes perfect the first time.
Now I see this is a cross section of the bottom, and we're pulling through, and it's not like it's completely covered. But do the quagga mussels colonize and grow in groups?
They do. Once they get started, they grow in groups. They're called, called druses.
Okay.
Where you get a bunch of them growing right on top of another, kind of a cluster of them.
Okay.
And we don't know how thick, using video, we don't know how thick these are. It looks like in some spots, the mussels are that thick on the bottom.
Okay, so we could be looking at multiple layers of mussels growing on top of each other.
Right.
Right. Now the other thing though, and I know we talked about this the other night on the deck, when we drop and we take a bottom sample, if we dropped over here, we might not get a very high concentration of mussels.
Right.
But if we dropped right here, we might get a huge concentration of mussels.
And that's why we're doing this, so we can get a better idea of what's really down there. We'll analyze different frames from the videos and get a good estimate of the coverage at the bottom of these things.
It truly helps me understand how we can get a better, accurate count on how many quagga mussels are really on the bottom. I know as we dropped the Ponar the other night, our device that took our soil samples, we brought some samples up that didn't have any mussels. Could have been the depth, could have been other factors, but
Right.
we also just could have missed them.
It could have been dropping it right there.
Right.
Yes.
So now we can take a look and say, hey, even though we missed them, they're definitely there.
Okay, here we come. It's 100% coverage in some of these areas.
Amazing, amazing.
Yeah, it is.
So Dr. Warren, this has been amazing footage. I guess what's one thing you'd want to leave us with the quagga mussel and the zebra mussel story that kids have heard so much about? Because as we look at this footage, they're real, they're there. What can you tell us about it?
All I can say is they are affecting the ecosystem. We're trying to estimate exactly how they're doing it and how much they're affecting the ecosystem. Fish populations are down considerably because of these things. We think we need to get a better idea of how many and why they're here. We also need to keep invasive species out. Once they get into a system, it's hard to get rid of them. It's going to take kind of a magic bullet to eliminate these mussels.
And there's no doubt that while we like the clear water, without a doubt that's reduced the food supply for so many other items in our ecosystem, in our food chain.
Yes, it has. If you go out here, if you look at the fisheries catches that Fish and Wildlife Service does, for instance, the numbers are very low compared to what they used to be. It affects sport fishing, it affects commercial fishing, everything.
Dr. Warren, let me ask you, if you had any advice for our students that are out there watching today, what would you give them about the field of science or doing research like this?
I'd say you have to be diligent. You have to really want to get into the field and work hard at it.
After all, we're on a boat in the middle of Lake Michigan right now, doing research that hopefully will help our ecosystems.
Yes.
Dr. Warren,
so.
thanks so much for being with us today on
You're
Science
welcome.
Quest. And remember, sometimes the answers to your scientific questions might be found on the bottom of Lake Michigan as you're riding across the sled pulled by the Lake Guardian. I'm Jed Allen Frills, and thanks for joining us today on Science Quest.
This is Science Quest. With your host, Jed Allen Frills.